Today on the show, we have Sarah Frier. Sarah is the author of No Filter, The Inside Story of Instagram, which is an excellent book if you haven't read it. It's won awards, 2020 Financial Times and McKinsey Business Book of the Year awards. She runs coverage for technology companies for Bloomberg News out of San Francisco. She's really an expert on social media in general, but a really deep dive on Instagram, which is why she's here today. Sarah, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So, Sarah, for people who may have not read the book, could you give just a few seconds about it, why it's so great? I have my opinions on why it's so great, but just a little bit of background.
Well, I'll let readers judge greatness for themselves, but the book is the first to take people behind the scenes of Instagram, this app that ended up having this tremendous cultural impact and economic impact, and changed the way we think about ourselves and society. And so, in telling the story, talked to hundreds of current and former employees and influencers and celebrities, advertisers, all sorts of people whose lives are connected to Instagram, teens, their parents, to try to tell the story of how the internal decisions got made and how they affected our external experience of this product and world.
It's really nice to read it sort of in a history format, but also it's what I would call living history because a lot of the characters are familiar from either pop culture or just tech news in general and kind of seeing where their career started to where they're at now and knowing sort of where this ends up, even, looking at from the start of Instagram to where things are now. If you haven't read the book right off the bat, I'm going to give away 5 copies of the book if you send me your information via direct message at Daniel Hill Media. 5 copies of Sarah's book, No Filter, The Inside Story of Instagram. So send me a DM and we'll arrange that. Sarah, let's talk about the book a little bit. Instagram really has changed so much in the world over the past 10 years. I think about things like People Magazine and Us Weekly, which are now just collections of people's Instagram posts because things have changed so much. Can you talk about how much Instagram has changed pop culture over the past 10 years and how that's affected our daily lives?
Well, what it's done is it's turned all of us into little developers of our own media products about ourselves, right? We are all sort of curating what we put on Instagram, how we present ourselves, and even the A-listers that would be published in a Us Weekly or People magazine, they have fewer gatekeepers to how they can be seen. It's not about the paparazzi pics, it's about the pics that they put out and curate themselves. And that's the kind of phenomenon that you would think would lead to more authenticity or direct connection with people in the world, and maybe increase some empathy. But as we all know, as users of Instagram, it hasn't always turned out that way. That having all of our lives displayed, the images, videos, thoughts on social media, while it can help us have insight into each other, it's also become something of a competition. Every time you post, you get likes, comments, and shares of that post. Shares are more a thing in Instagram stories than in the main grid, but that's we're getting ahead of ourselves. But followers and those things, the followers, the likes, are things that essentially give us a grade for everything we do on the app, and then teaches us what works, what doesn't. And then it becomes performative. It becomes something that we get good at. You get better at Instagram over time using it, knowing what people like. And that tends to be selfies. It tends to be things that show your life being quite awesome and full of all of these congratulatory milestones or beautiful things. And so I think that it's changed pop culture in terms of the the way personal stories are told, but it's also, even beyond that, changed what we think is cool to do, to see, to eat, to wear, to spend our money on, and how we curate those experiences for the consumption of our friends and beyond.
Yeah, it really has. I do want to dive into the features of Instagram because I think Instagram is very unique in the speed in which they roll things out, right? They roll out often new features every week or sometimes every few days. Thinking about over the past few years, we've seen stories, IGTV, live, reels, collections, the shop tab, notes, which are new. Some of those things have gone away, some of them have stayed. How do you think adding features so quickly has either helped them or hurt them? What do you think? Because sometimes people use those features and then just never come back to those features again.
Well, I think that it's and you'll hear more about this in the book, but it's the Facebookification of Instagram. It's Instagram chasing the youth attention, trying to become something to everyone. And it actually is quite different than the way Instagram started. Not to say that Instagram wasn't fast moving, because it certainly was, but the attention was a lot more to quality than speed, trying to make sure that users experiences were smooth and fast and reliable and simple. I think simplicity was, from what I hear from my sources, a very big priority of the early founders, and part of what made Instagram so appealing on all of these other apps with all of these bells and whistles and things you can do. It is quite difficult and confusing for a new person to join that app and know how to participate. But when you have something that is, Instagram in its early days was just about posting a single square photo, and anyone could do that with their phone. And so now I think, as it's becoming more complicated, you can go to Instagram and you can post your stories, you can post your reels, you can send a direct message, you can do notes now, you can do video, you can do like several different kinds of video, whether it's like a hyperloop or a AI generated filtered video or something set to music, something cropped. Like, there's just so many different ways that you can share. And I think that creates something of a crisis of choice, where if you are a new user of the platform, and in order for apps to have longevity, they need to grow. It's really tough. I mean, I tried to explain Instagram to an older family member the other day, and didn't have a very easy time with it, because it's definitely not intuitive anymore. So I do think, listen, it is still a very fast growing part of our social media landscape, but it's changing really fast too, and it is becoming more and more like the answer that Facebook, now known as Meta, has to emerging threats.
Yeah, you said a lot of great things there. One of the things that I think is tough is what you talked about, is when you're new to the platform or you're using a feature maybe that you haven't used in a certain way or it's changed. I went to upload a video the other day and it was in portrait mode, so I knew it would be a reel. I uploaded it as a reel, but it was more than 90 seconds, so the last bit got cut off. And I realized, oh, you have to upload it as a post, then it will be a reel once it's uploaded, which will be longer than 90 seconds because they only have reels. They don't have
Too
any
many
other type
rules,
of
too many
video.
rules.
How would you know that unless you were in it every day, right? There's no user manual for that sort of thing. And I think a new user especially would struggle with that because there are just so many options. In your book, you detail about how Instagram invented the bug fixes and improvements label, which is what you see every time the app gets updated. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I think they were just pushing updates so quickly, because everything kept breaking, that it was too much to say this is fixing, the bug we've cataloged that does this. They just started saying bug fixes and in performance improvements, and that is what people got when they went to update their app. And then all the other app developers saw that as, wow, we should just say that every time, because it's usually just little things that we're fixing and pushing. So yeah, app updates came very quickly. So I think I want to go back to what you were saying about the user experience and note something else, because as Instagram gets more complicated to use and create with, the the general purpose user is probably spending more time on Instagram now just consuming. And I think that what we're seeing in this moment, which is something that, I mean, my book came out in 2020, and this is really a trend that's happened in the years since. We're seeing Instagram become a place for passive consumption of video content like TikTok. And it's less of a place to share about your life. When's the last time you posted to your Instagram grid, like your main,
Just a regular photo,
just a
not
regular
very often.
photo?
No, it's not, to me, it's not worth it because the algorithm's never going to pick that up. So to me, it has to be a reel. I have to figure out, is there a hook in the beginning? What's going to keep people engaged? I have to do a cover image. There's so many more pieces of thought that go
So
into that now.
you're doing it as a creator, right? And
Right. Right.
that is what Instagram of today is for. I think unless you're posting to stories, just updates from your daily life, there isn't really a home for those, life update sorts of photos that used to be the main fare in the 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 scroll. And I think when people, at least, early research at Instagram showed that when people don't see their friends and family posting regular everyday photos and it becomes all professional content, then they feel like it's not a thing for them to do either. They don't see themselves in that experience. So I think we're going to see even less and less personal content that's permanent. And we're going to see more content that is trying to appeal to a mass audience.
It's a very different way of thinking about the platform for sure. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about some of the battles between Instagram and TikTok in the desire for your attention. And we're back. We're with Sarah Frier talking about her book, No Filter, The Inside Story of Instagram. Sarah, one of the things that I've been looking at closely is how much time people spend per day on Instagram. Around the latest numbers I saw, 45 to 50 minutes per day. TikTok stats somewhere between 45 and 65 minutes a day. I mean, I think this is Netflix, Disney Plus territory. Do you think Instagram has a chance to stay relevant long term, or have they sort of become what Facebook was to our generation, which is, you just have it because you have to have it, and that sort of pushes Facebook into MySpace world. But whatever. What do you think?
I mean, I think that TikTok is definitely stealing a lot of their thunder, and I wouldn't forget Snap as well. I think generationally, you sort of had the Facebook generation, and then the Instagram generation is maybe more millennials, and then the Snap generation is Gen Z, and TikTok is taking up a lot of attention from both Gen Z and millennials, and it is a more laid back experience, like the kind of thing you do without thinking about it. The thing that makes TikTok so addictive is their personalization algorithm that knows, after just watching your behavior for a few hours, can predict which videos will keep you engaged. I mean, you don't even have to tell them, I love skateboarding or I love gardening. Maybe you don't even know that you love watching videos of obscure Korean cooking, but then you see them and you're like, oh my gosh, I need more of that shark content or whatever it is.
Right.
And you don't have to decide. And I think taking the decision making process out of social media, it's not really social media anymore. It's like this bite-sized version of like Netflix recommendation. Like you're just getting fed stuff that could keep you attached to your phone. And that is what Instagram is trying to replicate. So all of the time you've spent over the last decade, whenever you joined Instagram, curating who you want to follow and thinking about who you're friends with and whether you should follow them and who's going to see your posts, that's all getting sort of turned upside down by Instagram's desire to be more like TikTok and show you content from anyone that it thinks you might be interested in. Now, there is a way out of this, but it's confusing. You can go and click to only look at content from people that you follow. But given that we just talked about how confusing it is to use all these new features, I don't think your average person knows that they even have that option. In fact, most people just say, I don't understand why I don't see my friends and family in Instagram anymore. Well, probably it's because they aren't posting as much because they don't think that those posts belong there anymore. So I think that it's a really big sea change for Instagram to try to become more like TikTok. And the number of minutes spent per day, one way to make that go up for longer is to make more of those minutes because video takes longer for people to engage with than simple photos.
Yeah, it's much more engrossing. One of the things you talk about a lot in the book, and this to me was a fascinating part to read, is the thought that went into resharing, whether or not to have that on Instagram as compared to Twitter at the time. Typically on Instagram, things don't go viral in the same way because of that lack of reposting. It can still happen, right? I think about the Jenner Kardashian make Instagram again that happened a few months ago. What do you think about that situation? Does that show that virality can happen when people feel very strongly about something, or is it just, the right moment at the right time in the right sharing way in order to get seen on Instagram?
Well, I think the main people that are getting hurt by this algorithm change is are the standard the creators who built their careers on Instagram. I think the people who have built this business around the expectation that they can reach the 100,000 or 3 million or however many people follow them, the idea that they can do that every time they post, those people just aren't getting in touch with their audience as much as regularly because of this algorithm change that benefits new untested content. I think the people that are really benefiting from the change are the up and coming folks who never really felt like they had a chance on Instagram because the famous people were already famous and they felt like they couldn't break in. There was really no way to get seen or discovered anymore because they didn't have a big following, and how could they ever build one now? It's too late. So I think that every app kind of struggles with that. Like you have the early creators who made their big splash, and then everyone who is newer feels like, okay, it's too late for me to try to make it big there, and I'll try something like TikTok instead. But now like the established people are feeling a little bit of angst around Instagram because they just aren't seeing their community as easily as they did before. They're maybe seeing more, they may be seeing the same amount of people, but they might be new people. And those new people don't always follow because, like we discussed, when you're on Instagram now, it's more of a passive experience. You're not always going to dive into that random video you were shown and say, "Oh yeah, I should follow this person because I always want to see it." It's harder. It's a lot harder.
I agree with everything you said. And I think it sort of forces someone who wants to make content or build an audience to continually look at what the next platform is going to be so they could start there before the masses reach there. And then when the masses do, it's like, oh, I'm already here. And I think that creates a never ending cycle of exhaustion. How do you see that working out? Do you see other people looking at it the same way I described it or doing something else?
Well, I do think that in order to be a creator full time, you have to be very dynamic in terms of how you think of your content. The skill that it takes to edit a video to I should say a photo to Instagram perfection with like the right angle, the right lighting, like everything that you sort of learned over the years through that trial and error, those comments, those likes, those followers teaching you with every post what's working and what doesn't. Then suddenly the algorithm starts prioritizing reels. Well, that's an entirely different skill set, and you have to learn yet again like what's funny, what's engaging, what keeps people watching. And do they like my face? Do they like animation? Do they like music? Do they want humor? Does there need to be a dance? Like all of those questions sort of get reintroduced. And so if you are a creator, you need to be flexible and creative about what the next thing is and dive into it, but that can be extremely exhausting. You're right. I mean, this is like I like to think about it like these companies have become the digital landlords for businesses that have no way to contact them. And they can like change the number on the lock pad. They can decide the square footage is going to be different. They can just randomly turn the lights off. Like they can do anything to the business, and there's really nothing you can do.
That's true. Yeah, and it's a really frustrating experience for businesses who are working hard to try to get people either in the door or get sales based on the content that they're creating. It really is a challenge. One of the things that you touched on a little bit, and I'd love to hear more on that, is how much Instagram was about, what are your friends and family doing, and how TikTok is now more, here's what strangers are doing that we know you're going to find fascinating. How do you see that for Instagram long term? Do you think friends and family are just going to completely go by the wayside? Or do you see like a resurgence, sort of like the way vinyl came back? Do you see that happening at some point where we all sort of do a retro thing? What are your thoughts?
I have definitely. I was just talking with somebody the other day about retro cameras, and but I don't mean like Instagram filters. I mean
Yeah,
like
yeah, the point and
the
shoot,
point and
right?
shoots. Yeah, the ones
Yeah,
that
point and
that
shoots are
people
coming
brought.
back.
They're coming back. You agree?
Yeah.
I should write a
Yeah,
trend
oh,
story.
100%. I mean, I read the same article that you did probably. I think it was in the New York Times, and I went to the thrift store and I looked how much the point and shoot was, and I was like, $100 still? I'm sure this was 20 like 6 months ago, but whatever. Yes, I agree. It's coming back, that nostalgic feel for sure.
Well, to your question, I think that Instagram was much like Twitter, an interest based network from the get go, where it wasn't just about your friends and family. It was about some community that you wanted to join, whether it was nature photography or cake baking or anything that was visually enticing. If you just wanted to find interesting folks around the world, one of the, I think he was user number 19 of Instagram, told me it was like looking at the world from space. You could see like reindeer herders and basket weavers, like all these people who like had Instagram in places that you would never go, and you got to see. And so I think that that's kind of what TikTok does in even more accelerated fashion. But Instagram for friends and family, the reason that that part was important is because that's what encourages you to share. If you see your friends posting on Instagram about, their day or their travels or their weddings or whatever they're doing, that makes it something that you want to participate in. You become part of the community. And when you are just sitting back and watching cool videos of like stunts and stuff, I'm gonna stop having examples of different topics because I I think you guys get the picture. There's everything. But when you're watching random videos that aren't your friends and family, you're not necessarily participating unless you're a part of that community that is making those videos. So I think that changes that dynamic. And I also think that when you look at it from the negative externalities perspective, the fact that if you are just being fed content, if content is being chosen for you depending on what an algorithm thinks you might be interested in, you are also more susceptible to misinformation and to manipulation in ways that you don't understand because you're not really thinking about why am I getting shown this content. It's like so passive that the power of suggestion is very strong. It's not like you're looking up the info. You're not like going to Google and saying like, I want to know if a coronavirus vaccine is going to hurt me. And you're getting links from the CDC and you're getting links and you're trying to find out. You're just watching like an emotional video pop up of somebody saying that it did for them. And I think that can be really dangerous as well.
I totally agree. Sarah, do you mind if you can tell us what you're working on, either in the near future or maybe a little bit longer term? Is there a part two of this book? Is it becoming a movie? Anything you can tell us about?
Yeah, so we're always in we did sell the rights to the book but it hasn't been made into anything just yet. So stay tuned. We have a bunch of important projects going on at my team at Bloomberg Technology, where we're chronicling Elon Musk's ownership of Twitter, Google as they're grappling with this new era of AI, Amazon trying to find its footing after Bezos left, and it's just a really fascinating time for big tech because I feel like these companies, you got to this level for years from like these really great, fast growing businesses that just simply can't grow forever. So a lot of them are trying to find their next act. Like Meta's figuring out whether the metaverse will work, for instance. Apple's thinking, maybe AR is going to be a thing. So I think that the next few years of chronicling, okay, can these giants turn their ships while they're already so big and so profitable? That's going to be really fascinating to watch.
I agree. All those things that you talked about, whether or not the metaverse turns into a real thing, if Apple makes their own either Oculus, type product or something else, that is all fascinating to watch. Sarah, thank you so much for being on and taking the time to answer questions.
Thanks for having me.
Instagram news got you covered, sometimes even TikTok. Relevant platforms in the metaverse ahead of the wave without a break or a pit stop. Still waiting for Zuckerberg to give me the big job. Pause. Use trademarks and logos with Insta's permission, of course. If you like the show and you gain some good info, maybe leave a review. It's a type of applause. Just drop me a message if you want to collab. If you got some good content or you want to run ads, at Daniel Hill Media is where I am. TikTok, Facebook and Instagram.
Did I ever have a chance to tell you about the Amazon AI project I'm working on? Did I ever mention that?
I think you mentioned it, but I didn't really
Okay.
get an update.
Okay. I mean, we haven't gone anywhere with it. Basically, like I've been working with a group of women who are named, she's right here, but ALEXA, because so many of the speakers that are out there don't support changing the wake word to a different name. And, how many women have been, you know, really dealing with situations because of this name becoming so widespread and becoming like basically synonymous with servant. And I worked with a reporter a little bit from the Washington Post who did a really, really deep article on it, which is it's fascinating. I personally like kind of can't relate to the situation, but I do not enjoy seeing people victimized by technology where it could be avoided with some programming of something that is
Yeah, it could
connected
be
to the
easy.
cloud,
Yeah.
right? Right. So I've been working on that. No success, but obviously going up against a 100-pound gorilla is not a thing that you can expect to happen overnight. So
Yeah, you should just be able to call it Amazon if you want.
right, like any like should be called anything, like right, like you should be able to open the app and say I want it to be called Spock or whatever name you pick, right? Like it
Right.
seems kind of simple, but well, cool. I don't want to hold you up, Sarah. I know you're very busy, but I really appreciate you taking the time to do this with
Thanks
me
for
and
talking with
listen.
me, Daniel. Appreciate it.